Welcome to the Furniture History Society podcast. My name is Elliot Sterling.
And I am Catherine Hardwick. We are both coordinators for the Early Career Development Programme.
In this series, we will be talking to an international group of emerging scholars who will be discussing their recent discoveries around the theme of furniture, its design and materiality.
Each episode will focus on an individual piece of furniture from 16th century Italy to Amsterdam in the 1930s.
Gerrit Thomas Rietveld became affiliated with functionalist architecture, and from the late 1920s started to concentrate more on designing mass-produced furniture. He executed a number of shop renovations for the Dutch company Metz & Co., who then between 1930 and 1955 started to produce his furniture, including various models of the zigzag chair and the so-called crate furniture range. This chair is part of a line of inexpensive furniture made from low-quality wood, such as that used in packing cases. In order to keep the price down, the wood was simply cut and assembled with screws rather than any joints. This lounge chair model will occupy our fifth and final podcast episode, where I, Vicky Jenner, talk to Maude Willaerts, Assistant Curator in the Performance, Furniture, Textiles and Fashion Department at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. Hello Maude. Hi. Okay, so did you want to go ahead and describe it for me? And how would you describe it visually?
It's a chair that's made of wood, and it looks very bulky in terms of constructions. You can see that it's made of planes of wood that have been just screwed together. It looks very handmade, and as in, it's not a refined design. It has very low seating, so it's an easy chair. So the type of chair that you can lounge in rather than sit very much like straight at a desk or something. And it is made of a type of wood that's not very refined. It's made of either pine wood or fir wood. Other sources say that it could be a red spruce. So this is a type of wood that was fairly available at the time it was made. So it's a chair that was made during the Great Depression. So it was a time of economic but also material constraints. So what Rietveld sought to do was, first of all, to find materials, but also to find materials that were cheaply available, that were inexpensive, and therefore would make inexpensive furniture for his clients.
Absolutely, and I think this is really the nature of the whole object. It's fascinating, the fact that it holds so much history. When you look at it just at first glance, it does look quite standard and quite simplistic, but actually there is so much embedded within this piece of furniture, within this chair. It's not just a simplistic object. It is actually harking back to a time where inexpensive furniture was needed. Could you talk a bit about sort of the context of the time, sort of why was it made?
It was part of a series that was designed between 1934 and 1935, which is the Crate series. It was a time of the Great Depression. It was the interwar period. Therefore, there were very few materials that were available, and people were very strained economically. So the company Rietveld designed this range of furniture for is called Metz & Co. And Metz & Co. was a company that usually sold furniture to middle class people, because when people think of Rietveld, they often think of the style and the highly stylized like pieces of furniture he designed, but less so of the crate furniture. And it's quite interesting because that's one of his most controversial type of furniture, like per se, in the sense that it was fairly poorly received because it looked so rough and unrefined, and when he was very attached to that line of furniture, was really thinking that it was really important to make furniture accessible to all and so on. The way Metz & Co would advertise this range of furniture is very telling of furniture inspired by wooden packaging or crates. Is not always taken like seriously, or not always put at the center of the stage. Metz & Co was like advertising it as like weekend furniture or furniture for like holiday and summer houses, so never the main thing, or even like furniture for like student houses, so never the main thing.
It's really interesting because it sort of taps into really relevant discussions and debates at the moment to do with sustainability and how we could ourselves be more sustainable in our sort of social living, how we can recycle and upcycle. And so it sort of taps into that, and it's a really lovely choice.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah,
Great.
Hopefully we'll learn more about how those kind of pieces have been received as well, because it hasn't been easy to convince people to upcycle.
And maybe it will have a second generation after our podcast.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed.
It's called a crate series, but it's not made from crates. It's made from the same wood that was used for crates. So that's quite fascinating to think that, you know, if other designers were using crates because it was like a readily available material in a time of need, he thought that crates was so brilliant as a type of design that there should be the main inspiration for a piece of furniture. And he has a really good quote, which I can find again if you like, because he received loads of like criticism about this line, and to that he answered something that I find quite amusing. He said, "A piece of furniture of fine wood made wholly according to traditional methods is shipped in a crate to prevent damage and breakage. Someone receiving such a crate at home says, at most, well packed. It has never been established that such crates represent a freely rendered method of carpentry aimed straight at its goal. The play materials of which it is composed make it stronger than its precious contents. Therefore, there must finally be someone who chooses a crate instead of the piece of furniture." So it's kind of a love letter to the crate.
That's fascinating. He was really sort of in love with this material, wasn't he?
Yeah, it was kind of like, it inspired a whole range of furniture, and even though that line was kind of like pre-cut wood, like kind of screwed together, if you look at like some of his furniture from like 10 years later, it still goes back to that range of furniture, and it's kind of like it's better finished in the sense that like there are more joints in furniture, or some of the wood has been cut a bit more finely, but it still comes back to this very like organic and geometric like structure. Yeah, so it's quite interesting. It's been quite like an important part of like an important time in his career and like in his designs, I think.
Absolutely. It does say on the V&A entry actually that it was probably intended to have upholstered cushions. So it wasn't actually it wasn't designed to be sat on without cushions. So it would have been a bit more comfy.
Yeah, it's the one, that easy chair is the one piece that came with upholstered cushions. And it's quite interesting, the fabric he chose for those cushions is one that's very reminiscent of designs by De Stijl, but they were already part of the Metz & Co catalogue of fabrics. So even though it's quite interesting with crate furniture, another designer I'm talking about in my talk is Louise Brigham. She was making furniture from crates that, like, immediately. Both Ridville and Brigham, it's not because they're using furniture made from or inspired by crates that they're ready to sacrifice comfort. So for him, it will come with cushioning, but it's also the way the piece is finished. So even though it's like this really rough wood that's used as the primary material, there's some research that says that the wood was heavily sanded to be like very smooth, and like the corners would like rounded off, so there is a sense of finish. It's a type of furniture. It's like the Crate series, like the furniture is often like painted as well. But that's not something he liked very much, because for him it was kind of a way to hide the origin of the material, and therefore he thought that the design would like a sort of like sincerity or like honesty that was like seeking.
Yeah, I love that minimalism. I was going to ask about the origins of the wood. Do you have any information about sort of where it was coming from? Where was it being imported, or was it actually from like a Dutch resource?
I'm not sure about that actually. It's I'm actually in conversation with our conservator to try to establish what type of wood all chair is made of, because at the moment it just reads wood, which is not ideal. But some I keep on reading about it, and I see that sometimes the wood is described as fir wood, sometimes pine wood, sometimes it's red spruce. So I haven't. First of all, we're not really sure what type of wood it is. So like trying to find an origin for it, it's not something I don't know about it. Yeah,
I suppose doing research into what was being widely accessible, which could be inexpensive, would be interesting here, and what was widely available at the time that would reduce the costs of import and that sort of thing.
So it's a type of wood that was used for crates. So because export and transport was still going on, so that type of wood was readily available, but I'm not sure where it came from.
So I'm really interested in how far this object has had a reprisal within the contemporary world today. So is there any legacy of this object?
It's actually very interesting, because it's a design that's been re-edited in between 1974 to 1986 by the Italian company Cassina. So it shows kind of its impact on the design world, and how there's still an interest into this sort of furniture, even about like 40 years later, its first design. And in parallel to that, another thing that's really interesting to me is that when do some simple Google research, and you type like pallet design or DIY with crates, things like that, people still do reuse that design as a model a lot, so that there are so many that you can find on Instagram and things like that. People really reappropriated that design.
Is it bad to say that it reminds me of an IKEA piece? Slightly. It's this whole ideology of taking it on yourself and being able to build something yourself quite easily at home, and have something which is very trendy and tapping into what is popular and a la mode at the time. So would that be fair to say that it's sort of also having a reprisal within the IKEA landscape?
Well, definitely. I think, first of all, IKEA is really good at like picking up on trends and have a feel for the moment. But I think, personally, I think the success of the crate chair today is what didn't quite work at the time, which is that that roughness, that like homemade look, that DIY look that we are now very much seeking, because this is my personal opinion here, but I think we all have like jobs that are like behind computers, and we do very few things with our hands. So no, being able to say I've made this and this is a DIY thing, it is a sort of like a source of pride, and sort of like a way to like elevate your status a little bit. When I think when Reedville first designed and that chair, when it was first distributed, maybe it was not too well received, because it was just reminding people of like how rough the times were, and that's as good as you can get at that time. But yeah, I think it was being criticized for its lack of craftsmanship, whereas no, it's almost something you kind of want to display because you can see you've made it yourself.
Thank you for listening to the Furniture History Society podcast. This series was made in support of the Early Career Development Programme and Research Symposium. If you have enjoyed our podcast series and would like to become a member of the Society, please visit our website at www.furniturehistorysociety.org.